While Putin, or perhaps his latest lookalike, frantically and nervously shakes his little nut before the cameras and draws new, ever-shifting red lines all around himself with a crayon, Erdogan, meanwhile, has quietly crept up and stretched the pale Führer into a precarious geopolitical split. Pro-Turkish and Syrian rebels launched an attack and captured Aleppo, the second largest and most important city in Syria.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. We are about to enter. The first groups of invaders have entered to clear the city, to carry out the cleansing. And as true believers should, we bow before Allah, thanking Him for these blessings.
The pro-Russian Buratino Assad troops retreated at supersonic speeds, abandoning equipment, ammunition, and Russian soldiers along the way, whom the rebels quickly turned into good Russians. The regular Russian troops and mercenaries quickly realized that things were heating up and made a run for it. The rebels captured dozens of tanks, APCs, artillery pieces, and even aircraft. Adia, Ali, Adia, why are you fighting here, man? I'm fighting you.
Subtitles by John Madozo.
Russian propaganda was so utterly shocked by Erdogan's blitzkrieg that they simply refused to believe what was actually happening. Solovyov hurried to reassure everyone that Aleppo was impossible to take.
I was in Aleppo. You can defend Aleppo for a long time, especially that legendary fortress. It's possible to hold out there for long, if only there were people to do it.
Half a day later, Aleppo was completely captured. They actually took it in just 3 days. Ironically, the Russians spent several years taking it, with the help of carpet bombing, and then lost it in 3 days.
Ironic.
And do you remember how the Russians laughed at the Americans when they were withdrawing troops from Afghanistan? How they laughed on every broadcast, saying that the pro-American forces were fleeing from the Taliban in terror.
The Russian leader called it a retreat, a hasty withdrawal of US troops and their allies from Afghanistan. He noted that regarding the Afghan issue, the SCO countries need a common coordinated approach.
In Syria, the exact same thing happened. There's just one nuance. The Russians did not withdraw their troops from Syria, and it's their forces that the rebels are crushing. And now the Russian military bases are under serious threat.
This is essentially a second front, forgive me for being blunt. Right now, we need to think about how to stop this. Because if, behind the scenes, somehow, if Russia and Iran don't convince the Turkish leadership to give the order after all, it's them who are supplying weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, providing training, and much more. I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow it turns out they're fighting with units, including artillery.
Bashar Assad acted like a true leader who professes traditional Russian values. He abandoned his country and fled to Moscow. Together with his entire family. It's funny how quickly he flew to the Kremlin. So quickly, in fact, that Putin hadn't even returned from Kazakhstan yet. Assad had to sit in a little hallway and wait for the creaky old geostrategist.
Urgently, Assad arrived on the 29th, that is, today secretly flew to Moscow to somehow try to fix the situation, because now the road is about to be cut off. There's Idlib province, there's Aleppo. This is a catastrophe for the regime.
Assad remind you of anyone?
Stop.
Assad is Yanukovych too. Just like him, at the slightest danger, he jumped on an ostrich and ran to Putin to beg him to send in troops.
You appealed to Russia to use the Russian armed forces to protect the lives. Freedom. But how? I didn't do it by accident.
Russian propaganda was going on and on, claiming that Assad is a people's president, that the entire Syrian nation has rallied around him. And only a handful of bandits led by Islamist Banderites are stirring up trouble. But as soon as Assad ran away and his army collapsed, anti-government uprisings broke out in many cities and towns across Syria. Even in Damascus, unrest erupted.
Stop.
Now Okurok faces a truly difficult and consequential choice. Either send additional military troops and resources to Syria, thereby weakening the Ukrainian front, or say goodbye to his Middle Eastern ambitions.
But if, God forbid, this leads to Assad no longer being in Syria, then the problems won't just be for the Iranians. For the Iranians, the problems will be very serious. But I read some comments from colleagues who say, why do we even need Syria? Where is Syria? And where are we at all?
We need Syria.
First of all, people need to understand. I had a very good geography teacher at my school, and I really loved that subject. Few know its location. It's 350 kilometers from Syria to Amenyat CSTO, Eurasian Union's southern border, about the same as Moscow to Smolensk or Bryansk.
Knowing Pinya, he'll get worked up over yet another humiliation and try to sit on two chairs at once, just like Kabaiva. The commander of the Russian contingent in Syria has already been dismissed and brought back to Moscow. And Russian aviation has resumed its genocide of the Syrian people, bombing Aleppo, which not so long ago felt so familiar all over again.
Aleppo is in flames after an airstrike. Russian, according to activists, on the night leading into Saturday, Russian aerospace forces aircraft resumed bombing Aleppo and its suburbs for the first time since 2016.
A real hysterical outcry erupted in the Z channels. We've been betrayed. Boss, it's all over. A knife in the back.
So what's happening, it doesn't even resemble our Kharkiv regrouping anymore because, well, some people are trying to draw certain parallels. They're writing that not only have they captured Aleppo, but now they're also saying they've taken Homso, Haman supposedly, just before you brought me on air. I managed to quickly read through that even our base in Tartus is now apparently under very serious threat as well. In fact, at this very moment...
They're especially outraged about the Kremlin's personnel policy. It's long been known that the most clueless and incompetent generals were sent to Syria. Those who failed on the Ukrainian front got a ticket to warmer countries. What could possibly go wrong in Syria, right? Even idiots could handle it there. But they couldn't. Some idiots took 3 years to capture Aleppo, others lost it in 3 days.
This is just absolutely disgraceful and completely unacceptable.
Naturally, the Z supporters immediately found a Ukrainian trace in Syria. It turns out that it's supposedly Ukrainian commanders who are leading the rebels into battle, and apparently Ukrainians also taught the Syrians how to effectively use FPV drones and other modern warfare tactics. As proof, the Z supporters point to the blue, green and yellow armbands worn by the rebels, exactly the same as those worn by Ukrainian armed forces soldiers. Hello, well, alright, that's good. I haven't seen anything, 60. Paradox. All day long, Russian propaganda claims that Ukrainians can't fight on their own, haven't learned to use equipment, and that NATO does everything for them. And of course, it's supposedly American commanders who lead them into battle as well.
Let's understand who we're fighting against. We're not fighting Ukraine at all. We basically defeated Ukraine itself in the very first 2 or 3, however many days. When we took Hostomel, when we essentially disarmed Ukraine by destroying its main military forces, and then the war with NATO began, and not just with NATO, because we're fighting countries that aren't even officially part of NATO. So right now, it's a war with NATO on Ukrainian territory.
But in Syria, apparently, Ukrainians are already super soldiers. Russia's bipolar disorder is getting worse. It's especially funny that Moscow trained its troops in Syria in order to attack Ukraine. But now, according to their own words, Ukrainians in Syria are training Syrians to destroy Russians.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
But the main backstabber of Russia is, of course, Erdogan. He took advantage of the situation very skillfully. Hezbollah, which Assad relied on, has been drawn into the war with Israel and has already been partially defeated. Russia has committed all its combat-ready units to Ukraine. And Wagner PMC, which used to form the backbone of Assad's army, vanished near Bakhmut.
It vanished.
That's why Turkey, using Putin's own tactic of they're not there, set out to reclaim its historically Ottoman territories.
We'll talk more later about what exactly the Turkish authorities are doing in Syria. But let's note right away, one of Erdogan's favorite justifications is his concern for the Turkmens, our people in Donbass, in other words, in northern Syria.
The news from Syria rattled not only the openly pro-war Z patriots, but also the covert FSB agents. Even Major Yulia Latinina couldn't hold back. After downing 100 grams of acetone in the morning, Yulia questioned the right of small states to exist and mocked the idea of respecting other countries' borders.
The idea that you can carve the world up into a bunch of tiny states that can provide nothing inside themselves except endless dictatorship and endless infighting, and then call those existing international borders, which, for heaven's sake, are supposed to be inviolable. Well, we're watching that idea die right before our eyes.
Apparently realizing in time that she was now openly speaking in Putin's words, Yulia decided to butter up Erdogan as well.
There will be no normal life in this part of the Middle East until the Ottoman Empire is at least partially restored.
What the fuck?
There you have it, the real Russian opposition, quoting Putin and dreaming of restoring the Ottoman Empire. But while Syria has completely taken over the minds of the entire Russian Reich, the main Führer himself is keeping quiet.
Well, because... because... Just because...
Because Putin has nothing to say. Erdogan publicly humiliated and spanked him. Maybe some kind of statement is being planned, and right now they're preparing little Putin for it, strapping his hands to the table and his rubber butt to the chair, so the Führer doesn't shake on camera like a loaf of bread on a bumpy road. Maybe Putin will even threaten to hit Istanbul with an Oreshnik or Trabzon with a Sarmet. Or maybe, following the good old tradition, he'll just hide out in his bunker until everything blows over on its own. And on the news, they'll cheerfully report how the Russian forces have valiantly retreated from Syria to more advantageous positions.
It seems that after transferring its highly advanced and sophisticated military aircraft and fighter jets to Ukraine, Russia is now unable to intervene quickly within just 3 or 4 days at most. Now, 4 days later, they have only just now started to take action after armed groups managed to gain control over Syria's second largest city. I don't know if they will actually be able to drive them out without causing massive and widespread destruction and damage to this large and densely populated city, which is currently home to about 5 million civilians.
Unlike the Z-Telegram channels, the official propaganda follows its leader and also provides very minimal coverage of the events in Syria. On the main talk shows, Aleppo is mentioned briefly and in a very dreary manner, and then they switch to nuclear blackmail and the Georgian Revolution. Oh, who is good and who is bad in Syria? Everyone can decide for themselves. But a second front for Russia at this time is a truly remarkable and wonderful New Year's gift.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.